Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Where are the rest? Nobody has joined yet. I'm waiting for you to join. Okay, join soon, please. So, I'm going to share my screen. Are you able to see the screen? Okay. So last class, I was just giving you an outline of what I had taken last week. Since you were not there, I was just briefing what I had taken last week. So I was discussing the last session we stopped was the characteristics and quality attributes of embedded systems, which is a sure question for university. Now I'm going to the next section of module one. That is the fundamentals of embedded systems. So all these portions were taken last week, but still I'm just giving you an outline of what was taught earlier. So The fundamentals of embedded system, again, it starts with what an embedded system is. And as I said earlier, it is an electronic or an electromechanical device that has been designed to perform a specific function, and it is a combination of both hardware and firmware. And again, it is a microprocessor based system. An embedded system is a microprocessor based system. It is built to control a function or a range of functions, and it is not designed to be programmed by the end user. The end user cannot alter the program, which is or the firmware that is embedded in the hardware. So these were the common definitions which were said earlier. Again, that's repeated in the fundamentals of embedded systems. And then we come to the basic concepts of embedded systems, and most of the embedded systems, they are made up of most of the complex systems, embedded systems, they are made of microprocessors or microcontrollers. And as you know, you have studied earlier that a microprocessor is a single chip CPU based on information technology, integrated technology. And the first microprocessor, these are all general awareness for you. The first microprocessor was the Intel 4004, and it was merely an embedded system because it was designed for to perform calculations only. So it was designed for a specific function, such as to act as a to perform a calculator. So the first processor was designed to be an embedded application, that is Intel 4004. And there were other microprocessors that entered into the market after 4-bit microprocessors. There were 8-bit microprocessors, 16-bit, 32-bit, etc. And also, along with microprocessors, microcontrollers also began to enter the market. And 8-bit microcontrollers, 16, 32-bit RISC microprocessors, etc. They came to the market. And with the advent of these microprocessors, more complex embedded systems could be built. Now, next, we go on to the important section is the characteristics of embedded computing applications. So the characteristics include sophisticated functionalities. So sophisticated functionalities in the sense that they could do more complex applications, and so complex algorithms were needed, and also the user interface could be designed. The complex user interfaces needs to be designed, which includes multiple menus and many options. So these seem to be sophisticated in their functionality, and such systems has to be designed in order to design an embedded system. So most of the embedded systems, they have sophisticated functionality, and to implement these functionalities, you need complex algorithms and user-friendly interfaces. Then next is meeting deadlines. Most of the embedded systems have to meet deadlines, and for it to meet deadline, it should be real time, as well as it should be multi-rate. Multi-rate in the sense that an embedded system for a multimedia application, they can include both audio and video, and both of them should go hand in hand in order to get to improve the performance of the system. So if any one of them run at a slow rate, if the video runs at a slow rate than the audio, then there won't be the application where the output may not be synchronized. So this will fail to meet the requirements of the system. So multi-rate applications and real-time applications should be properly designed, otherwise it will not meet its required output. Then third is the cost, and cost includes manufacturing cost and the power and energy cost. And manufacturing cost includes the cost of in microprocessors used, then the amount of memory used, and the type of devices that the embedded system is going to, with which the embedded system is going to be built. And power and energy is also an important factor, because energy consumption affects battery life. And so if a huge amount of heat is consumed, then the battery life will be less. So for most of the embedded system, the battery life is a major concern. Now, next we go on to why we are using. The next question is reasons for using microprocessors in embedded systems. Now, why we use microprocessors is that first is they are very efficient way to implement digital systems, and most of the digital design, they are based on pre-designed instruction set processors. You know that each of these processors have its own instruction set, and based on the instruction set is pre-designed, and based on the instruction set, applications can be developed. And two factors that make microprocessor design based design faster is that microprocessors, they execute programs very efficiently, and also the manufacturers, they spend a great deal of money to make the CPU run faster and making use of the latest technologies. Then the second reason for using microprocessors in embedded system is that microprocessors makes it easier to design families of products, that is a product with a little variation or including an additional functionality than the previous product is called a family of products. That they have basically the same design, but some with some additional functionalities in different products. So programmability of microprocessors was a benefit for making families of products. Next, the hardware platform for embedded systems used was usually PCs were most widely used for providing the programming environment. Programs would be run on PC, and later it was transported to the target processor. And then the next generation computing platform is the cell phones. Next, we come to another important university question: challenges in embedded computing system design. Hello, can you hear me? Just giving an outline of what was taken earlier. These are all theory questions. I'm just going to through the important questions. Notes will be given to you. Okay. If you have any doubt, you can ask. Hello. If you have any doubt, you can ask. I'm just going faster because it was taken earlier, and I'm just giving you an outline. Okay. Next, challenges in embedded computing system design. This was a university question. I think first university question included this part. Challenges in embedded computing system design. The first challenge is the choice of hardware. What are the difficulties that we face when we come to designing an embedded computing system? First is the choice of hardware, and that is the here we have to decide what are the which are the microprocessors suitable for the design, what is the amount of memory needed, what are the peripheral devices needed, etc. And when we consider these hardware choices, it should meet both the performance deadlines as well as the manufacturing cost. And the choice of hardware is important because if you are using too little hardware, then the system fails to meet the deadline. And if you are going to use too much hardware, then it becomes more expensive. So the choice of hardware was an important challenge while designing an embedded computing system by the designers. The next is meeting deadline. Deadline is an important deadline is a point at within which some action is to be done, or the system should perform a particular functionality. And one way to meet the deadline is to speed up the hardware and increase the size of memory so that the program runs fast. If the size of memory is right, then program can run faster, and also you can speed up the hardware. But while increasing the size of memory, or when you are going to speed up the hardware, it makes the system more expensive. So that was a challenge. Then minimizing power consumption. So one way to minimize the power consumption, because embedded systems, once they are put into the market, they should run for years until they wear off. So and the replacement of battery replacement must the system, people will be reluctant to use the system. So one way to make these digital systems consume less power is to make it run more slowly. But if it is going to run more slowly, then it will lead to missed deadlines. It cannot meet its functionality, or it cannot meet its performance. So designers, what they do is they carefully design the system so that they can slow down the non-critical parts of the machine. Those parts of the machine which are not important or non-critical can be slowed down, whereas those parts of the system which need high performance can run at a normal speed. So this will minimize the power consumption while still meeting the performance goals. Then, so minimizing power consumption was also a challenge when designing embedded products. The next is designing for upgradability. These hardware platforms, once we choose a hardware platform, it must be used over several product generations. When we design a particular system, if it is modifiable or if it can be upgraded to build another system, then the particular hardware can be used effectively. So for several different versions of a product in the same generation, you can use the same design. Then we say that the hardware is upgradable, and upgradability supports new features to be added even by changing the software. You can change the software to include additional functionality without changing the hardware. So we can say that the hardware is upgradable. The next is reliability. Reliability is an important in some applications, such as in safety critical systems, where the system should never miss the deadlines. This makes it, and so in such systems where reliability is a major concern, there are difficulties faced by the system, which includes one is complex testing. The system should be tested thoroughly, otherwise the system cannot be. We cannot assure that it is reliable. Then the next is limited observability and controllability. That is, embedded systems, they usually do not come with keyboards and screens. Once it is an embedded system, the firmware is embedded in the hardware, and we can just either see either the output, or we can just give an input. We cannot see what is going on inside, which means the system has limited observability, and we cannot control the system. That is, once you've given the input, you get an output. In between, you cannot stop the system in between, so you cannot control the system, and this makes it more difficult uh, um, to diagnose the problems once it arises. So the next one is restricted development environment. So the development environment for embedded systems, most of the embedded systems, they are developed based on the customer requirements. As new requirements arise, the development tools may not be available to support the newly developed embedded product. So often it is limited. The tools available for developing the software and hardware will be limited, and this will affect the proper design of the embedded system. And most of the cases, code is compiled in the PC, and then it is downloaded to the embedded system. And to make it a standalone system. So all tools necessary to test an embedded system will be loaded into the PCs. There are several tools available, and these are depending on the application, several IDEs available, that is integrated development environments available. So, the code will be first tested on these IDEs, or there can be simulators or emulators for testing, and after testing, then only then when it is error free, it is transferred to the target hardware. So all these restrictions limit is a challenge for developing embedded computing systems. So mainly these are the following challenges. The choice of hardware is a challenge. Meeting deadline is a challenge. Then minimizing power consumption you have to minimize the power consumption, which is again a challenge. Then you have to design for upgradability. Then reliability is also a concern, and these are the and reliability faces all these three challenges, that is the complex testing, limited observability and controllability, and restricted development environment. The next is performance in embedded computing. The embedded system designers, they have very clear goals in mind, and mostly the two goals that they have in mind is that their program should meet the deadline, and at the heart of embedded computing is real-time computing. Most applications are follow real-time computation, designed for real-time computing, and to to meet the real-time requirements, the embedded system should be designed in such a way that the system responds within the deadline, And to understand the real-time behavior of an embedded computing system, they can analyze the system at different levels of abstraction. And the levels of abstraction for a real-time system includes the following. One is the CPU. The CPU influences the behavior of the program, particularly when it is a pipeline or a cache processor. It influences the behavior. That is, multi-core processors, etc., can uh, speed up the device, and it can meet deadlines faster. Then next is the platform. Platforms include the buses and I/O devices that support the CPU. Then program is the software that we are going to embed in the hardware, and it acts as a window for the CPU, and it may consider the program. The CPU needs to consider the entire program to determine the overall behavior. Then, task is generally several programs. They run simultaneously on a CPU, and each of them we call as a task. And a multitasking system can improve the performance of the embedded system, especially for a real-time system. The next is the multiprocessor. As I said earlier, multiple processors can improve the performance of the system, and this the interaction between the processor, it adds more complexity to the overall system performance, but it can improve the performance of the embedded computing system. So these are the factors. There are two goals. One is the program should meet deadline. Another is embedded computing systems are mostly real-time computing systems, and so the real-time computation must be satisfied by this, or the deadline should be met by the system. And to meet the deadline, real-time systems are uses the following, that is CPU, platform, program, the next we come to a sure question for university. Most of the questions, they include this section. The section cannot be skipped in this module because that is the most important section. Can you hear me? The rest, what I was saying was all theory section, which you can read and understand. The next section is very important. Can you hear me? Okay. So the most important part of module 1, that is embedded system design process. So what are the designers, when the designers start designing an embedded system, what are the objectives they keep in their mind? So the first statement says that the embedded system design process aims to achieve two objectives. The first one is to give the various steps involved in the embedded system design, and the second is to consider the design methodology. And design methodology is the way that the system is going to be, the method used for building the system. So these are the goals that the designers keep in mind while designing an embedded system. First is to what are the various introduce the various steps in the system design, and the second is to consider the design methodology itself. And considering the design methodology is important for three reasons. Why do we fix a methodology for development? We need a specific methodology for developing an embedded system. And what are the reasons? The reasons for fixing or choosing a design methodology is that it allows us to keep a scorecard on the design, that is to ensure that everything has been done. And when once you ensure that all the functionalities has been met, then it will optimize the performance of the embedded system, or it will improve it will improve the performance of the embedded system by performing functional tests. All these functional tests will be included in the design process. So based on the functional test, this is the designers can check whether the performance has been optimized or not. So it helps us to the design methodology helps to keep a scorecard on the design to ensure that the performance has been optimized by performing the functional tests. Then second is that it allows to develop computer-aided design tools based on the methodology. The tools can be designed to test the product. So computer-aided design tools can be developed once the methodology has been fixed. So we're developing a simple program that takes in a concept for an embedded system, and creating a complete design would be a difficult task. To in order to design an embedded system, first break it into processes, and break the entire design process into steps, and each step can be automated. Once a system can be automated, you can depend on computer aided design tools to substitute for this automation process. So once the methodology is fixed, automated tools can be applied. That is the direct meaning of this particular point. Once a methodology is fixed, then computer-aided design tools can be applied to automate the process. Then, third is a design methodology makes it much easier for members of the team to communicate. If a single methodology is used for developing a product, then the methodology can be understood by all the team members, and it helps the team members to communicate effectively in order to develop the product. So these are the three important reasons why design methodology is important for designing an embedded system. So embedded system design process has two objectives. One is to give the various steps in the design, and the second is to fix the design methodology, so that we fix the design methodology in order to keep a scorecard on the design to ensure that the performance has been met. Second, it allows to use computer-aided design tools so that the entire design can be automated. Third is it makes easier for the members of the design team to communicate with each other and understand what is going on. Each team member can communicate effectively if the design methodology has been fixed. Now, as I said here, the first objective is to give the various steps involved in the design, embedded system design process. That is the first objective. And what are the major steps in embedded system design process? So here we summarize the major steps in the design process, and this shows a top-down view of the embedded system design process. So, very important figure. Just note that this is a very important figure and an important question, very sure question. A sure question. Okay, so major steps in embedded system design process. So you have 5 steps as shown in this figure. The first step is requirements phase. Second is the specification phase. Third, architecture, designing the architecture, then designing the components, and then finally integrating the components to form the entire system. These are the 5 major steps involved in the embedded system design process. As you know, when you're developing a software system, you might have studied software engineering. There we go for development different software process models, and the phases in software development include the first phase is feasibility study, then comes requirements analysis, then design, coding, testing, maintenance. Likewise, as we follow those phases for developing a software for an embedded system, we follow these phases for developing the product. And first is the requirements phase. Then from the requirement, after collecting the requirements, we go for writing down the specification, then develop the architecture, which is a block diagram of the system, then design the components that need to be built. Based on the architecture, you design the components, and then when there are different components involved in a system, they must be connected together to form the entire system, and that is known as system integration. So what I have said now, starting from requirements to specification to architecture, then to component design and to system integration, this we call it as a top-down design. And also the next, the right-hand side shows a bottom-up design approach, where we start from the design of the entire system, then we identify the components needed, then we go for the best architecture that is needed to build the system, and then we write down the specification, and then we finally come out with the requirements that the system would satisfy. And this is known as bottom-up approach. Anyway, top-down approach is the most preferred for most of the applications. And so we go on to the top-down design steps. The first phase is requirements phase. So before going on the requirement phase, let me say a general point about all these phases together. Design tasks. Now, design tasks, these are the tasks that are performed at each and every phase. Now, as I said, there are 5 phases, and for each of these phases, certain tasks need to be carried out. Certain common tasks are carried out in all these phases, and those tasks are known as design tasks. So the tasks needed to be performed at every step in the design process is called design task. So in each of these 5 steps, these design tasks is carried out. So the tasks that are carried out in every step of the design process is called the design task. And there are 3 tasks involved. The first is analyzing the design, then refining the design, and then verifying the design. These are the 3 tasks which are done in all these 5 phases of design process. First is analyzing the design. You analyze the design at each step to determine if it meets the specification. Then refine the design. If you want to add more details, you can refine the existing design to add more details, and then verify the design to ensure that it meets all the system goals such as cost, speed, etc. So these are the 3 tasks. For each phase, we consider these 3 design tasks, and these 3 tasks, that is analyzing the design, refining the design, and then verifying the design. So these 3 tasks, they are known as design tasks. So design tasks are those that are carried out in each stage of the design process. Can you hear me? Can you understand what I'm saying? Hello. So what is a design task? What do you mean by design task? Can anyone say what is design task? Hello? Hello? Okay, analyzing the design, then refining the design, and one more point is there. Hello? What is the third point? Analyzing, refining, and the third point, verifying the design. Okay, these are the design tasks involved, and you have to carry out these tasks in each and every phase of development. Okay, so what are the different steps involved in the design process? Different steps. Subin. Okay, first phase is requirements. First step is requirements. Second step, specification. Third step, okay, first step was refinement, requirements, then specification. Third is architecture. Then fourth is components, and fifth is System integration. Okay, these are the 5 steps in the design process. Very good. Thank you for responding. So first is the requirements phase. As we know, this is the first phase of the design process. This is the initial stage of the design process. And similar to what we have studied in software engineering, it gathers the requirements of the system to be designed. Now, what do you mean by requirements of a system? Requirements, usually we gather the requirements from the customer who want to build a product. Like for software engineering, the customers approach us for developing a software like this. Here to build a product also, there are customers will approach us to develop a product, and we have to collect what are their requirements, what are the functionalities they want to satisfy in the product. And this is the stage. It is during the requirement stage that we capture the requirements of the system. And for the so the this proceed the entire this phase, the requirements phase proceeds in 2 phases. First, it gathers an informal description from the customer. As I said, the customers approach us for building a product, and so we ask them what their requirements are. In an informal way, we talk to them and we collect what their needs. And this is the first stage: gather an informal description from the customer, and this is called this becomes the requirements of the system. And after collecting the requirements from the customer, we refine the requirements into a specification that contains enough information to begin designing the system architecture. So once we have collected the requirements, we refine. Customers, they may not know the technical details about the system. So we have to refine the requirements in a way that all functionalities can be met. So after refining the requirements, we write it down into a document, and that becomes the specification, and it contains enough information for designing. So second phase was specification phase. After collecting requirements, we document it, and that documentation is called the specification, and that is the second phase. And after getting the correct specification, it can be used for designing the third step, that is the system architecture. So all these 3 phases are connected. We collect requirements in the first phase. During the requirements phase, refine the requirements and write it down as a specification in the second phase. That becomes the second phase, and this specification is then passed down to the third phase, that is the system to the architect designing the system architecture, where the developers read the specification carefully and design an architecture for the system. So these requirements, as you might have studied in software engineering, they can be of 2 types. One is functional requirements, and the other is non-functional requirements. So requirements are of 2 types: functional requirements. Functional requirements are the basic functions that are to be implemented in an embedded system. The basic functions to be implemented in an embedded system are called the functional requirements. So that is, once we give an input, you get a specific output. Then that is a particular functionality that is satisfied by the system. Then we call it as functional requirements. And non-functional requirements are those requirements that we measure when the system is in use, and those requirements are listed below. First is the performance of the system, next is the cost factor, and cost includes the manufacturing cost and non-recurring engineering cost. And non-recurring engineering cost means that it includes the personnel costs, the people who are developing the system, the cost involved for hiring efficient personnel for developing the system and designing the system. Then the third is the physical side. The product aesthetics is very important in designing an embedded product. For example, a handheld device, it requires the size and weight to be always less. Then the third is next is power consumption. It is important in battery powered systems, and most of the embedded systems, the power is a great concern since it works on battery, and the battery life should be maximized so that the product will survive in the market. So these are the non-functional requirements. After collecting the requirements, in the same step, we go for requirements analysis. So we'll continue in the next class. Hope you understood. Is there any doubt? If you have any doubt, you may ask. Okay. So thank you.